The collection will try to cut off the head and leave the tail. If you enjoy watching, please support by liking, sharing and commenting. This is the final masterpiece of Hong Kong horror films. It is also a folk horror film directed and starred by Daniel Wu. It is adapted from the globally sensational Elisa Lam supernatural incident, the collision of the supernatural and reality. It has sent chills down the spines of countless viewers. Hurry and watch it with your unlucky friends. Legend has it that every year in the lunar July, it is called the Ghost Festival. This month has an extremely heavy yin energy. The gates of hell will also open on the 15th of July. The yin energy reaches its peak and slowly opens, and those deceased vengeful spirits will take this opportunity to return to the human world and reincarnate, to resolve the grudges left from their past lives, and to prevent them from harming others. Every time it comes to this moment, local opera troupes will prepare a grand performance specifically for the vengeful spirits. As long as they enjoy the performance, they naturally will not linger in the mortal realm. It seems that the opera troupe owner, old Wang, hides some shocking past. It seems that there are some horrifying stories hidden within him, ever since his son, Ah Hui, returned. Strange occurrences have not ceased. Ah Hui previously failed in business on the mainland, was swindled out of his family fortune by a friend, and then broke up with his girlfriend. As a result, during this time of doing business, he neglected his family. He barely called home all year round. Now, feeling utterly helpless, he had no choice but to return with thick skin. Looking at his son's figure, old Wang, though dissatisfied, still thought to himself, what's done is done, as long as he is back. So he prepared a room for his son, and made a table full of delicious dishes for him. However, Ah Hui's half-sister still harbored resentment towards him. Thanks to you, today is so plentiful. There's both duck and fish. Are you done? Take care of yourself first. Facing his sister Xiaolan's scolding, Ah Hui didn't say anything. Instead, he turned around and went to the room to pack his things. But just when he wasn't paying attention, it seemed as if an invisible hand suddenly moved the picture frame. That night, Ah Hui called his friend seeking a job, but his friend directly rejected him. Ah Hui felt somewhat disappointed after hearing that, but as he walked, it felt like he kicked something. He looked down and saw that it was actually a brazier for burning paper for the dead. Ah Hui was so scared that he quickly offered a prayer, hoping not to attract anything. However, behind him, two children inexplicably appeared. Did you see them? The driver told Ah Hui in fear that he had just hit two children, but Ah Hui said he hadn't seen anything. But looking at the brazier he had kicked over, and thinking about what the driver had just said, he couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. The next day, Ah Hui, unable to find a job, he contacted his ex-girlfriend again. Little did he expect that while they were on the phone, a few strange figures suddenly appeared in the audience. Suddenly, several eerie figures appeared. They were staring intently at Ah Hui. With July 15th approaching, old Wang hurried the troupe to rehearse. However, due to the rushed time and heavy tasks, along with having a rebellious daughter at home, he soon found himself overwhelmed and hospitalized. But even so, the grand performance must go on. Otherwise, the whole village would have a year of unrest. As the leading lady in the troupe, Xiao Yan decided to let Ah Hui take on old Wang's role to complete the grand performance. Little did they know, just after they discussed this matter, a strange old lady suddenly pushed a dead body into the elevator. She had just arrived here, and was staring intently at the two. Sir, please don't blame me for speaking out. I'm doing this for your own good. What's the matter? This July. Don't wander around. Why? Otherwise, some things. I'm afraid you won't have enough time. Ah Hui was so scared he was shivering. He hurriedly took Xiao Yan away from there, but that strange old lady had been staring at them the whole time. Such an exciting plot. Of course, you need to use good equipment to watch. My brand new Apple 15 Pro, worth $7,999, rented from the Renren rental platform. It only costs half the official price for a year. Changing phones every year without pressure, checking area for tablets. Besides phones, you can also rent cameras, game consoles, anything can be rented, even health products. For renting things, go to Renren Rental. Everything can be rented. Save money with Renren Rental. To relieve the tension from earlier, Ah Hui took Xiao Yan to a bar. After a few drinks, Xiao Yan ended up leaning on Ah Hui's shoulder. But just as the two were heading back, Ah Hui accidentally discovered there was an eerie woman in red by the roadside. She was lowering her head and waving at him. He thought he was mistaken, so he repeatedly confirmed the situation. But when he looked back again, the woman in red had mysteriously disappeared again. Ah Hui didn't pay attention. He took Xiao Yan back home. But perhaps she had drunk too much. The previously intelligent and elegant Xiao Yan suddenly became a different person at this moment. She approached Ah Hui directly. Then she walked closer to him, even went straight in for a kiss. Faced with Xiao Yan's initiative embrace, Ah Hui did not refuse. Unbeknownst to him, just as they were having their duel on Mount Huashan, the woman in red that Ah Hui had seen before suddenly appeared in the corner. He was practically drooling. On the other side, Xiao Lan was taking care of her father in the hospital. She was sitting by the side, feeling drowsy and resting. Unexpectedly, the next second, a sound suddenly came from behind her. Xiao Lan didn't think too much. She instinctively pulled back the curtains to take a look. She just happened to see that the neighbor was also taking care of a patient. But when she came to her senses, she finally realized too late. Her room was clearly a single patient room. There was no one next door. Thinking of this, she immediately pulled back the curtains. As a result, there really was nothing there. Seeing this situation, Xiao Lan thought, she must have been too tired during the day, and that's why she felt off at night. Thinking this, she stood up to drink some water. Unexpectedly, just as she was drinking, it seemed that something was rapidly approaching from behind. Immediately after, Xiao Lan seemed to be possessed by a ghost. She slowly put down the thermos in her hand. She gradually walked toward the outside. She arrived at the elevator and repeatedly pressed the buttons. Then she kept pacing at the elevator entrance. Occasionally, she was flailing her arms and legs at the air. It seemed like she was cursing something. Just when I thought she had finally stopped, the next second. But ever since this bizarre event occurred, Xiao Lan seemed to have changed overnight. She was no longer the rebellious girl she used to be. Her every gesture became much gentler. She even started learning to sing opera with the soprano. My sister's unusual behavior made Ah Hui feel that something was off. But since nothing had happened with Xiao Lan, he didn't pay much attention. In order to ensure the grand performance went smoothly, Ah Hui had to work overtime every day until the early hours. Yet bizarre things would always come one after another when he was alone. Not long after, Ah Hui suddenly heard the sound of singing coming from outside. He thought to himself, it's so late. Who is still rehearsing? He followed the sound to check it out. Until he reached the hall, he finally learned it was actually Xiao Yan and Xiao Lan. Ah Hui saw this and didn't approach to interrupt. But just at the moment he turned around, a ghostly figure suddenly floated in behind him. And every time he returned home after work, Ah Hui had to walk through a small path. But today, this path seemed even more eerie than usual. The path was silent and empty. There were no lights along the roadside. Only a strange woman was slowly walking not far from Ah Hui. At first, he didn't pay any attention. But as he got closer to the woman, Ah Hui was horrified to discover that this woman had turned her head 360 degrees. Yet her body continued to move forward. The woman's eerie and terrifying gaze made Ah Hui shiver involuntarily. He couldn't help but stop in his tracks. But unexpectedly, the woman also stopped in her tracks. Then she turned her head back and continued walking forward as if nothing had happened. But she hadn't taken a few steps. The woman stopped in her tracks again. Seeing this, Ah Hui immediately ran back with all his might. He tossed and turned until deep into the night before finally falling asleep. However, when he woke up the next morning, he discovered that under his bed, there were actually 3 bowls of headless rice. Seeing this, Ah Hui immediately called for the disciples of the theater troupe. He asked them what on earth was going on. After several inquiries, he still found nothing. Helpless, he could only ask Xiao Yan to tidy things up first. Unexpectedly, just as Xiao Yan bent down to pick up the basin, Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan. At that moment, Xiao Yan seemed to be having a seizure. She kept twitching in the same spot. She even snapped her waist with a crack, breaking it instantly. Seeing this, Ah Hui hurriedly sought help. But the moment he opened the door, Xiao Yan suddenly returned to calmness. It seems as if everything that just happened never occurred. And in response to Ah Hui's concern, she nonchalantly told him that it was just an old issue of hers. Just then, Xiao Lan suddenly took Xiao Yan's hand. She said that if she rested a bit more, she would feel better. But Ah Hui clearly remembered that the two had only just met recently. Moreover, he had never heard Xiao Yan mention this before. How did that girl know about it? He suspected that there was something suspicious about it. So, when no one was around, he installed cameras at the theater. However, during this time, the 2 women returned to old Wang's hospital room. Xiao Yan wanted Xiao Lan to go on stage to perform. So she told old Wang that Xiao Lan was quick at learning things. She had already mastered the skills in just a few days. But old Wang couldn't help but feel surprised upon hearing this. Because singing opera is no easy task. Normal people cannot learn this in a short time. But no matter how he refused, Xiao Lan still told her father expressionlessly, "Dad, I can do it. And that day, I wanted to wear mom's clothes, to go on stage and perform. Is that okay?" Hearing Xiao Lan mention his wife, old Wang's heart suddenly skipped a beat. He immediately concluded that something must have happened to the theater troupe recently. However, as soon as this was said, Xiao Yan, who was beside them, instantly changed her demeanor. I said I wanted to wear her clothes. At the same time, Ah Hui was checking last night's surveillance footage, trying to see who it was, who put the decapitated food in his room. However, he watched for a long time, but still saw no one. Instead, it was Ah Hui himself, wandering around the theater. He even jumped straight down the stairs. Looking at such a terrifying scene, Ah Hui was so scared he nearly wet himself on the spot. He couldn't help but remember, when he had just gotten out of bed, a sudden bone-deep pain shot through his right leg, so he slowly pulled down his pants. To his shock, he discovered that his right leg had somehow been broken. It wasn't until he checked the surveillance footage that he finally understood that he had encountered something dirty. Just as he was filled with dread, a hand quietly appeared behind him. Xiao Yan, you came at just the right time. Look at what I recorded, come take a look. Immediately after, Xiao Yan first playfully touched Ah Hui, then she quickly grabbed the knife from the table, and stabbed fiercely towards Ah Hui's chest. Seeing this, Ah Hui immediately grabbed her arm. With all his might, he pushed her to the ground. Only then did he narrowly escape disaster. But Xiao Yan, who was lying on the ground, at this moment, things started to feel wrong. I saw her body convulsing uncontrollably. Her screams continued one after another. Just as she was struggling desperately, an invisible force suddenly yanked her up and tossed her around in the air. Even in the end, she began to repeatedly bang her head against the wardrobe. Eventually, she crashed into the wall and lost consciousness. Ah Hui was so scared that he sat in the corner, afraid to move. But things didn't seem to be as simple as he imagined. Go. Hurry up and go. Looking at the scene of Xiao Yan lying dead, Ah Hui trembled all over, unable to move. To his surprise, as soon as he looked up, he saw Xiao Yan, who had originally been dead, suddenly come back to life as if nothing had happened. She was staring at him with a constant smile, but she did not harm Ah Hui. Instead, she slowly left the place, worried that Xiao Yan might encounter misfortune. Even though Ah Hui was very scared inside, he still leaned on his cane and moved forward to chase. But he searched for a long time on the stage, and still did not see Xiao Yan's figure. Only the security guard who came in response to the sound stood trembling in place, as if he had seen something terrifying. Ah Hui looked up. On one side was Xiao Yan and on the other side was Xiao Lan. They were all dressed in white with strange expressions, and had been hanged right there on the stage. Ah Hui felt an immense terror in his heart upon seeing this. He couldn't help but ask the security guard what had just happened. But before the other could answer, the next second, the two bodies on the beams suddenly vanished again. Ah Hui hurriedly searched around with his flashlight, but he didn't notice at all that the vengeful spirit had quietly taken the security guard away. Hearing the noise, Ah Hui immediately turned around to look. As a result, he saw the scene of a fierce ghost devouring a living person. Staring at the terrifying ghost before him, Ah Hui was so scared that he even dropped his cane. He hurriedly limped away. But right after that, the ghost, like a person holding a chick, dragged Ah Hui back and forth. It wasn't until he was pulled into a corner that it finally stopped. Then, the evil spirit possessed everyone in the theater troupe, and controlled them to slowly approach Ah Hui. This scene made Ah Hui tremble with fear. But at that moment, he was utterly unable to move. He could only stand there trembling, waiting for death. Just when Ah Hui's life was hanging by a thread, old Wang suddenly rushed back from the hospital. He held a shrine in his hand. He walked around those who were possessed. Only then was he able to temporarily dispel the fierce ghost. Just as a few people were about to leave, the vengeful spirit came back once more. It instantly possessed Xiao Yan, and lifted her directly into the air. Ah Hui just wanted to save her. The spirit then violently threw Xiao Yan down. At this point, the entire opera troupe was in chaos. Each of them was mentally unstable, completely unaware. As long as they saw a person, they would rush forward to kill them. And old Wang was unfortunately possessed by the spirit as well. He directly grabbed Ah Hui by the throat. No matter how hard Ah Hui struggled, it was all in vain. But to protect his father, he used his last breath to tell the spirit, "Don't bother my dad anymore. If you want to mess with someone, come at me." As soon as the words left his mouth, a cloud of black smoke was drawn out from old Wang's body. It then immediately possessed Ah Hui's body. He lay on the ground, unable to stop twitching. It seemed like he was making a final struggle. And it was at this moment, Ah Hui finally learned the whole truth of the matter. It turned out that 40 years ago, old Wang and Ah Hui's mother had an unknown past. At that time, old Wang was the troupe leader. His mother was a leading female role, Hua Dan, in opera. She was originally the star of this play, but she twisted her ankle. Old Wang replaced her with another woman for the lead role. For this, his mother was willing to sell her body. She wanted to reclaim her position. Seeing this scene, although old Wang superficially agreed, in reality he had long been plotting, because in recent years, he had already taken advantage of his profession to move between various women in the troupe, and Ah Hui's mother was merely one of his tools to vent his desires. After learning the truth, his mother completely harbored resentment towards this. She directly took the sulfuric acid and violently splashed it onto the substitute's face. Then, she set a great fire. This burned to death all the women related to old Wang. At the time, old Wang was out running errands, so he was not implicated in this. The vengeful souls of these women gradually turned into malevolent spirits after their deaths. They constantly tormented Ah Hui's mother. In the end, the mother could not bear it and chose to take her own life. Old Wang was tormented by the malevolent spirits all night long. For over a decade, he found no peace. After learning the truth, Ah Hui used up the last bit of his consciousness to pick up the fragments of the altar on the ground and stabbed fiercely into his own chest. This was how he eliminated all the malevolent spirits within him. After this incident, more than a dozen people in the whole opera troupe, only old Wang survived. He took his new apprentice and sang the grand performance on stage, but the audience below was packed. The onlookers from the underworld. Alright, today's story ends here. Subscribe to the channel to continue watching. See you next time.